Hi, everyone. My name is Elena Martinez, and I'm one of the co-artistic directors of the Bronx Music Heritage Center. We want to welcome you tonight for our December percussion discussion. And we have a really special program tonight. We're featuring another pianist from the Bronx. And as those of you who might have seen a lot of our percussion discussions, we feature drummers, percussionists that have connections to the Bronx, but piano is also a percussion instrument. So you'll be listening to an incredible pianist tonight too, the story of a pianist, Oscar Hernandez. Before we get to that interview though, and I'm sorry about the coquille, get that out of the way. Before we get to that, to the interview, I just want to mention our funders. The Bronx Music Heritage Center programming is supported in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature, public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the Lily Auchincloss Foundation, and the Loriam Tisch Illumination Fund. And also, for those of you, all the programming that we do at the BMHC online during this pandemic has been free and open to the public on our Facebook page, BX Music. But tomorrow night, WEDCO, our parent organization, will be having a gala to raise money for the organization. So please help support. You can go to WEDCO, WHEDCO.org/step up. And you can see that tomorrow. And that'll be, you'll see some different musicians we work with, some of the people who work at WEDCO, as well as a great performance by members of Bobby Sanabria and the Multiverse Big Band with Janice Siegel, the Manhattan Transfer. So please tune in tomorrow at 7 o'clock for that if you would like to donate and help out WEDCO and the Bronx Music Heritage Center. But now to introduce the program, I want to introduce the other co-artistic director of the BMHC, Bobby Sanabria.
Hi everyone, my name is Bobby Sanabria. How about a big virtual applause for the one and only Elena Martinez, my co-artistic director, the woman behind the scenes that makes things happen. Also, un saludo cordial to Jorge Vasquez, who's running all our technical thingamajigs in the background to make this happen. As Elena said, on Percussion Discussion, we feature drummers, percussionists, etc., that have some connection to the Bronx. And as Elena said, piano is definitely a percussion instrument. But this gentleman I'm going to introduce to you is not only a Bronxite and a pianist, but he's also a producer, a multiple Grammy winner. He's been a conductor on Broadway and worked in the world of Broadway as a composer and arranger, and as a composer and arranger in the worlds of salsa, Broadway, as I said before, and Latin jazz and jazz. He's an educator as well. He's a raconteur, bon vivant. He's an incredible band leader, and he's got an incredible history that we're going to delve into right now. And we're so proud that he's with us, especially since he's a native S.O.B. like me, a son of the Bronx. Please welcome to Percussion Discussion the one and only Oscar Hernandez. Oscar, welcome to Percussion Discussion. Bienvenido.
Saludos, Bobby. It's a pleasure to be with you, and a pleasure to spend a little time with you and all the people who are going to be tuning in to us. And it's always a great thing when you get to talk about music. Yes, for me. Indeed. So, and you're one of the experts, so I'm happy to be on with you.
Great, thank you. It's a privilege and honor here. Now, as we always do on Percussion Discussion, we kind of treat this like an in-depth testimonial about your life. So my first question to you is the obvious one. When were you born, and where were you born? What area of the Bronx did you grow up in?
Well, I was actually born in Manhattan, but my only recollection was of the Bronx, because I think we moved when I was 2 or 3 years old to the Bronx. Don't remember exactly, I don't know exactly, I should have asked these questions, but my only recollection was being brought up in the Bronx my whole life. So I consider myself a Bronxite. It was an amazing time to have been part of what I deem as the cultural revolution of Latinos in the city of New York, and Latinos were discovering their identity in that city, and in particular Puerto Ricans. My parents are from Puerto Rico, and they immigrated here looking for a better way of life. And a big part of what that cultural revolution was music, because music was the thread that tied everybody together in all kinds of social settings. And made them identify with their roots. So it was an important part of me, an important time to be born and raised in New York City, and a proud Latino and a proud Bronxite.
Fantastic. Just so we get some perspective, what's your exact birth date so we could know the time period that you actually grew up in?
March 22nd, and I was born in the mid 50s. How's that? 54.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's a fantastic time period to grow up in, because you saw the transition from the Bronx being a place for the dreams of working class African Americans, blacks, and whites, and unfortunately, then the later decay that happened in the late '60s, going into the '70s. When you were a kid, now this is something that I know because we're friends for a long time and colleagues. But tell everybody how many brothers and sisters you have.
I have 10 brothers and sisters. I have 4 brothers and 6 sisters, so a total of 11. And we grew up poor, and I was the only musician. I feel really, as I look back now, these 50 years later, 50 when I started, that it was destined for me. It was put in my path. I think God, divine order was clear on that I was going to have this career as a musician. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back on how things happened, that I can't explain why they happened, but it's only like through, some mystical thing that I was giving. I joined the boys club at 12. I started playing the trumpet. And so my brother, this is a whole story, I've told it 1,000 times. My oldest brother, because I'm the youngest, was the superintendent of the building we lived in. And so somebody gave him a piano, and he fixed up one of the rooms like a clubhouse, and we painted it beautiful. And that piano was the beginning. I got it when I was 14. It was the beginning of me kind of exploring and experimenting and associating myself with other musicians in the neighborhood who had a little bit more experience than I did. And it was a beautiful time of exploration for me as far as the music. And obviously, the music that my older brothers and sisters were listening to and partying to and getting ready to party on the weekends as they would be getting dressed to go out was the music of Puente, Machito, Tito Rodriguez, Eddie Palmieri, Ray Barretto, Willie Colon, on and on and on. And there's so many more. I mentioned those as the main crowd, Celia Cruz. So that was the music that I was listening to everywhere, and started, kind of putting my energies towards that music. I remember distinctly Eddie Palmieri. I know you had a great discussion with him. I had a blast listening to him tell his story, but I remember he had a song that was kind of a hit called Azúcar. And right. It was a feature for the piano and the band. And everybody was dancing. People just danced their hearts away. Dancing was a really big, important part of the culture and the way, way for people to express themselves and let loose and get away from their daily, problems, daily issues. So I remember that song like it was, today, how clear it was listening to it and listening to how beautiful the textures of that particular song and Eddie's band was at that time, La Perfecta. So, but then again, there were so many other people that I started listening to and I started trying to emulate. And I started playing with young neighborhood bands. We started a group when I was 15, and I actually recorded my first record at 16, which is amazing. So it was there for me. I mean, I then went on to have an amazing career after that with so many people, too many to count, unless you have a 5-hour show. But the truth of the matter is that career, and I say this, that the education that I received as a young musician in the city of New York at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, into my early 20s, playing with all the amazing musicians that I got to play with, you couldn't pay for at the best university. So it was an incredible time. I was absorbing this music left and right for so many incredible musicians. Not only that, but the scene was all about, that in terms of the social scene. And as I got to play, there were so many clubs in the city of New York. People were partying, you know, from one club to the other. And we were playing early on. When I started with Iman Miranda at 18, we were playing 5, 6, 7 days a week. So, you know, it was an era, a bygone era that really was the foundation and the base for me to be the musician that I would become, you know, in later years and, you know, to this day. So
now you said you were playing trumpet in high school. Was this first of all, what high school was it?
Well, I started playing trumpet in junior high school. I went to Arturo Toscanini Junior High School, which was, when I went at 7th grade, it was the first year that it opened. So it was dedicated to a great composer. And we had an amazing teacher named Richard Morris, and he was just incredible. His energy his passion and energy were infectious. So I remember the band was playing some really hip stuff for 7th and 8th graders, you know? And I remember he tells this young black kid, you know, on the trumpet, take a solo. And he was going, oh man, you sound like Miles. You know, he had that sound. So he was blown away that this kid had that Miles kind of sound. And he was very much super knowledgeable, not only of classical music, but they picked the right teacher for that school. And he left an indelible imprint on me as I started, you know, later on, 2 years later, playing the piano. So it was pretty cool.
Wow, fantastic. Now, was he Jewish, African-American? Or...
No, he was white. I would say Jewish. I never thought about it, but Morris. Right. So that sounds like it would be coming from a Jewish, you know, background. So
you remember what his principal instrument was, or was he just a general band?
You know what? I don't know. It might have been trumpet. But he had this incredible infectious passion, and he had a great sense of humor because he would make us laugh and we'd be laughing, but at the same time, you know, when he was serious, there was no BS. You knew you had to really, you know, take care of business, and he let you know. So I think that was something that I learned early on, that it's, you know, you want to teach people, you have to kind of, you know, not make it all serious all the time and gain their interest. So it was a fun time looking back all these years.
Now, with the trumpet playing, like since you started on the trumpet, was it something like, I know in the New York City public school system at that time, they would ask you what instrument that you wanted to play, and if they had enough of that particular instrument, they would assign you to another instrument. Was it you actually picked the trumpet that you wanted to play trumpet, or they assigned it to you?
No, I picked the trumpet because I think I started playing at the Gramercy Boys Club in the Bronx on Washington Avenue. And I started playing bugle in the marching band. Then they finally gave me a trumpet. So I had my family buy me a trumpet, right? And when I got to junior high school, I told them I'm already playing trumpet. So they kept me on trumpet, obviously, and it was a good thing. But you know what, the issue I had was I was having a problem with the physical part of the trumpet. You know, I remember taking lessons at the Boys Club, and they had a great teacher. His name was Buddy White, great teacher, really great jazz player. But after a while, he says, you know what, because I was having a problem just hitting a G or an A above the staff. So it wasn't, you know, he said, why don't you switch to saxophone or the piano? And again, divine intervention, somebody gave me a piano. So that's how it all started for me. And then I left the trumpet and, you know, look, actually, that's a kind of a long story. It's a funny story, but there's a guy that we know, I won't mention his name, who stole my trumpet.
That could be one of the people that we know.
well, somebody who was on the scene and you know, drugs were a big part of the scene. And I was a kid. He says, let me borrow your trumpet. And, you know, that was the last I saw of the trumpet. And I see him years later, and, you know, we laughed about it because by that time I was, you know, quote, successful as a piano player. But yeah, so it was fine because I was already, you know, delving into the piano.
So this will be the mystery question for you when you start writing your memoirs. I got a pretty good idea who it was, but
I'll tell you privately, but I can't say it publicly.
That's so funny. It reminds me of Andy Gonzalez, the great bass player who recently passed away. this year, he told me, well, he told his roadie Keith Thomas, because I asked Keith, did Andy ever play electric bass, like an electric Fender bass, what
Right.
African Americans call on the scene a pork chop, you know?
Right.
And Keith said, yeah, Andy told me he had one, but somebody stole it from him. And he said that was the best thing that ever happened in his life, that they stole his electric bass, Fender
Yeah.
bass. He just
Well, it must have happened young. I mean, because I knew Andy. I met Andy when I was 18, and then we formed this incredible relationship. You know, the first 10 years of my professional life, and I never saw him play an electric guitar, not even just grab one, or even. It was always about the acoustic bass and the baby bass for him.
So we just Andy's name just came up. Who were some of the contemporaries that you came up with? That was a golden time period that you came up in, because you're transitioning from the big band Mambo era, etc. And the Palladium Ballroom is still in existence. In 1966, it finally closes, and then places like the Corso took over. But that next generation of musicians that you represent, who were some of your contemporaries besides Andy?
Well, I mean, Nicky Marrero, my first band that I included with Iman Miranda was Nicky Marrero, Frankie Rodriguez, Joe Santiago on bass. And I was 18 and these guys were in the band. So Nelson Gonzalez was in the band also.
Just so we, for the people that are tuning in that possibly don't know these names, Nicky Marrero is great timbalero. Who else did you mention?
Frankie Rodriguez was the conga player who kind of short-lived because he passed away a number of years back, but was a great conga player who was very much into the folkloric aspect of the drum as well, and was a santero. So, but yeah, I mean, and early on, before actually I met Andy, I was playing with Joey Pastrana, at 16.
Balero, yeah.
Yeah, the timbalero who had a band, and I remember doing my first recording. Sonny Bravo was part of the session. They called me, and he had great players as well. The Pucci Bolong was a trumpet player. He always had great guys coming in and out of the band, and so for me, I was always exposed to these musicians who were a whole lot better than I was, and just listening to them, and not to mention arrangers. I mean, arrangers alone was, I mentioned Sonny Bravo, Eddie Martinez, Louis Ramirez, Luis Perico Ortiz, Marty Schella, Jose Febles, who would become my mentor, early on, because I met him early on. And he's one of the great, unheralded, to me still, the best arranger that existed in those days. But there were so many musicians that were part of the scene. Then we went to Grupo Folklorico, contemporaries, Nestor Torres, Dave Valentin, Manny Oquendo. Obviously, I got to play when I got to play with Celia. There were so many people part of that scene. I'd have to.
Now, when you were coming, you mentioned Sonny Bravo, who's a Elio Osakar. Sonny Bravo's his stage name. Everybody knows him as that. Fantastic pianist, arranger, Cuban American. He's a legend. He's older than you. How did the older musicians, when you were coming up with Nicky Marrero and Frankie and all these other people that you mentioned, how did they look upon you? Did they embrace you, or did they say, "Oh, who are these upstarts, et cetera, et cetera"?
Well, I never felt, any animosity. I just did what I had to do, and I was basically a shy, quiet kid back in those days, and I wasn't presumptuous, and I was always kind of felt that I wasn't good enough anyway. So I didn't have any ego about my playing. I was just learning the ropes and gaining the experience. So I don't think anybody saw me as a threat. But I mean, the truth is, once I started getting going, that was the era of Fania Records. And they wanted to use new people besides Sonny, besides Papo Luca, Larry Harlow. My first recording at 16 was produced by Larry Harlow. It was a group called La Conquistadora on Vaya Records.
Wow.
And Larry, we did it with the rhythm section of the band and Leopoldo Pineda and the Sam Burtis on the trombones. And Larry was the producer. So I was, getting to be exposed, and people were starting to, I guess, say it's a young up and coming piano player. It's pretty good. And I could read, You know, I mean, I wasn't a great reader, but I could read, and I was learning as I was going. I was teaching myself. I did take some lessons, and then later on, I went to college and got a degree. But that pales in comparison to what I learned on the street, honestly. Because by the time I got to college, I went to City College. I already knew what they were talking about. They were talking about, you know, jazz harmony, and I was already incorporating it into what I was doing. And I was reading, you know, I can't remember the jazz. There were a lot of Charles Baker books. There was a lot of great books that you could learn from in those days that everybody passed around and say, hey, you got to get this book. So I would read these and I would like, oh, wow, check that out. Yeah, I could do this. I could do that. Mainly teaching myself and gaining the experience early on with the people that I played with and the early recordings that I did, which, you know, stand to this day. I mean, you know, to think that I recorded Así se compone un song when I was 18, that's a seminal record because it was very popular, and Eve Maya was very popular at the time. But yeah, so it just started to take off little by little from there, and I started finding my way, and more than anything, gaining experience, you know, that you can't help but gain playing in all these incredible places with all these incredible musicians. Right. So I was really blessed. I look back now, I'm really blessed to have had the career that I've had, you know, now culminating in me giving back to that legacy with my own band, which is pretty cool, you know?
Right. Now, what we call salsa today is, in terms of the piano, is a pretty codified, intricate, complex form of piano playing. And of course, you were coming up in the Bronx, in the South Bronx at the time, where that music is ruling at places like the Hunts Point Palace and the Concourse Plaza Hotel and many other ballrooms, etc. How did you start learning how to play in the style? Did you start by copying records, or did you actually see players and ask them questions, etc.? Because you, part of what your upbringing, you said, is some of it is self-taught. So how did you, like, for example, how to do like a common thing that we do in the music, playing 1-4-5 in major, you know, like in 2-3 clave. You know, how would you? Would you go up to somebody and ask them, or you?
No, it was a self-discovery thing. As I was learning, you know, harmony on the piano and inversions and different chords, that I would try to apply that according to what I was hearing. So, I mean, I remember distinctly listening to a record that Palmieri did called the song Café.
Right.
Café.
Yeah.
Right, that song. And I remember he takes a piano, so I remember going like, oh man, what is he doing? And then I realized, oh, it's C minor, and I would learn the keys. So I basically taught myself, and then I would, I guess, you know, it was meant for me, Bobby. That's all I could say. Because I was hearing it already. I was feeling it, and I was hearing it. And I mean, when I listen, I don't listen to anything I've done in the past. I try not to anyway, but I happened to hear like one of the first piano solos that I did. I'm like, wow, how did I have that wherewithal to? Because I was already building just naturally on my own and building my own awareness of how to fit in and copying, because you would copy, that's the way you learn. You copy what other people are doing, but you adapt it to how you learn and to your own situations. And not only that, but I would be reading music from these bands, and I go, oh, wow, look at, that's the way they play that, or that's the way they say. They wouldn't have stuff written out. So you couldn't help but absorb that into your own education.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I was with Mario Bauzá, and we worked together with Mario Bauzá for a time, while everybody's like on a break, I'm looking at the trumpet parts and seeing how they're harmonized, etc. You know, if you have the wherewithal and the desire, the curiosity, which I tell my students, that's the biggest thing that'll help you in your career, is having curiosity. Well, it certainly has helped you in your career. One more question in regards to your early career, like in terms of especially the piano, the role of the piano in what we call salsa today, which is basically Cuban music the way we Puerto Ricans play it in New York City and on the island, and with our attitude, etc., and our social, political, cultural leanings. How did you learn about the intricacies of clave, playing in clave? Was it a natural thing, instinctual thing, or did anybody ever come up to you, hey, don't play that guajeo like that, it's crossed with the clave or anything like that?
Well, I don't remember actually distinct experiences, but it was all, we were surrounded by that concept, especially in New York. I talk to Cuban musicians and they go, we don't even think of the clave, we just play. You know what I mean? And they don't think of it that we do. But in New York, it was a big thing about learning, you know, Cuban music, is that you had to learn what the clave was. So early on, you realize that arrangements are done in a certain clave, songs are sung in a certain clave, and guajeos or montunos or rhythm structures are played in a certain clave. So you couldn't help at my age to be totally aware of that and listen and compare and like, and again, I learned it naturally. Sure, you listen to the patterns and you learn the patterns of, you know, the percussion players, and you naturally begin to feel it. Once you're playing the music as much as I was automatically feeling, you know, yeah, this is 3-2, this is 2-3, eso está cruzado. Oh yeah, you could tell eso está cruzado. And in Rangers, Sonny's a big, you know, big guy. You know, he was, no, so, you know, that they would have fights in terms of something that is crossed. So it's kind of interesting to see, and I would go like, wow. So I mean, and now I think I'm pretty much an expert in it, you know, because I don't even think about it. I just write, you know, and well, it comes naturally.
I've played many of your arrangements, and they're beautiful. You know, it's always a pleasure to play them, especially the figures that you write for the horns. Really hip things that the roots of them are when you're playing with people like Ismael and also I want to talk to you a little bit about your.
It all comes from. It all comes from that.
You're a rumbero.
Yeah. So as a piano player, you are a rumbero, you know, and Palmieri says they call him a rumbero the piano, and I'm right behind him. I feel that percussion really deep in my soul, you know. And for me, people look at me, I'm really white with, you know, green eyes. They go, coño, como que te siente la música? But I've been doing it since young, so and I love it. You know, I'm really passionate about it, man. When I sit there and I write and I, you know, I imagine it in my head, you know, with a whole band. You know, as it stands now, during this pandemic, I've been preparing all the music for the new Spanish Harlem Orchestra record. And I've been having a blast, just like, you know, going, yes, 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 writing and letting it all flow. And we're about done with, you know, having all the music prepared. But
fantastic. Well, talking about clave, talking about all these great, incredible drummers that you learned from and all the other great musicians that was surrounding you at a young age, your tenure with Grupo Folklorico Experimental Nuevayorkino, which is a long title, and for those of you who don't know that group, it was a kind of a meeting of the minds of some of the great elder statesmen of this music who were Cuban, Puerto Rican, along with younger players like Oscar and you mentioned
Andy
Nelson.
And Jerry.
You mentioned Nelson. On the tres, the Cuban tres before, the mandolin instrument of Cuba. That must have been an incredible experience working with people like Chocolate and others. And then you're there with the young group of musicians, Andy Gonzalez, yourself, and then you're working with older players like Manny Oquendo, etc. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, without a doubt, that was when I look back. Imagine you mentioned Chocolate, right? Alfredo Almenteros. You mentioned Manny Oquendo, Vigilio Marti, who you didn't mention, right? Those guys, they had their finger on the pulse of what the essence of the music is. So, I mean, Chocolate, you hear a trumpet solo and you go like, wow, man, nobody can play it like him. You know, there are a lot of other great players, but they don't play it like that. So when you're surrounded by those people, same thing with arrangers. I mean, for me to play Gil Lopez arrangements, Rene Hernandez, and, you know, people from the older generation, you know, Ray Santos, to mention, those guys understood what the history and evolution of the music is. So that you couldn't help but be influenced. And, you know, I'm proud that I'm all about maintaining that legacy while I'm alive, you know, with my own band and with everything I do, because I'm looking ahead to the future, but I'll never forget, you know, what's important in terms of, you know, the history. It's like, I always tell people it's like trying to play jazz and never heard who Charlie Parker was, or Art Tatum or Bud Powell, or as a piano player. You have to really study the history of the music and understand the evolution, the thread of the evolution, to where we are now. So that's very important as a musician, I think.
You mentioned jazz. I've known you for many years. We've worked together in many different situations, and privileged to have done so. We had a conversation where you talked about, I believe you were 17 or 18, and you really didn't know about jazz in terms of jazz harmony and playing it, et cetera, et cetera. And a horn player came over to you one day and told you, "Hey, this is relay that story that you relayed to me about your first real encounter with what we call jazz."
Well, the story is that I'm doing a session at 16 years old, a recording session with Joey Pastrana, who, when I first went to play with him, I went to do a gig, and I had never played. I never read the music. I was too nervous, and I totally messed it up. And I remember Chivirico Davila was singing. He was cursing me out, going like, because I was messing up his beautiful bolero, Noche de Ronda. I'll never forget. But in any case, I told Joey, look, give me the music and I'll learn it. So he gave me the music. The next time I came in, I knew it. So I was already playing steady with him. And he's going to record a record. So I'm at the studio, and we're going over this chart. And Charles Davis, the great baritone sax player, jazz player, who's playing on the session, comes up to taps me on the shoulder. He says, "Hey, kid, see this chord right here? It goes like this." It was a G7 sus chord. I didn't know what that was. I was 16, so I didn't know what a sus4 chord was. But he tells me, "Hey, it goes like this." And I looked at his hands, and I went like, "Oh, wow, wait a minute." And boom, he taught me that chord. And from then, it was like enlightening. And that's, that's oftentimes the way you learn things as a young up-and-coming musician, by somebody else who can kind of impart their knowledge. And he was very nice about it. Just, I think he had to solo over it or something. And I had to learn exactly what that meant. And I didn't know at the time, but those were some of the experiences that, kind of stay indelible in my mind as part of my learning experience.
So the early pianist, one of the influences from our knowing each other, you've told me, has been Eddie Palmieri. Who were your other influences, both first on the Latin side of things and then on the jazz side of things, once Charles got you hip to the vocabulary of jazz harmony, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, I mean, on the Latin side, definitely was Eddie and Charlie Palmieri. So as a young piano player, you couldn't help but know that those were the guys who were at the forefront of piano playing in New York City. And obviously there were other people as well, but people like Ricardo Ray, Richie Ray, that were on the scene. Larry Harlow was on the scene that you couldn't help, as a young piano player, learn from. Papo Luca, who's just an amazing musician, an amazing pianist. Sonny Bravo, Eddie Martinez, people like that who were older than me, Gil Lopez. And I'd be remiss because there's so many other piano players that were part of the scene I can't remember right now. But people who didn't have the name, like Mike Rios, Gil Suarez, there was a bunch of other people that were always part of the scene because they would be playing and we get to hear them as well. So, but what became a big influence for me also at that time, and part of learning the evolution of the music, we were hanging out in Andy and Jerry's house, and I got to meet Rene Lopez, and Rene Lopez is one of the foremost musicologists of Cuban music. He's Puerto Rican, but he's one of the most knowledgeable people of Cuban music. I mean, extremely knowledgeable. So we would go to Rene's house. And I remember being 18, 19, and he'd be playing, Alcaño, Melodía del 40, Pancho Bravo, Aragon. So I got to listen to people like, Arsenio, obviously, Lili Martinez Griñán, Peruchin, Ruben Gonzalez, and a host of other piano players I can't remember now who were part of that scene, in Cuba. Because he had, records that you couldn't hear anywhere else but his house. So we would it was like a beautiful, incredible listening, learning experience that we would have. And that music turned me around in terms of, understanding where our music that we were playing came from and how it developed. But and on the jazz scene, Bobby, again, hanging out with Andy, I owe Andy and Jerry an incredible debt of gratitude because, if not for them, I wasn't exposed to it, but they were. So we would go to Andy's house, and he would talk to me about Art Tatum, Bud Powell, Wynton Kelly, Red Garland, Bill Evans, all the incredible piano players. There's so many more. Bobby Timmons, that were part of, El Gardner, part of the fabric of jazz. And then we'd be listening to the contemporaries. The contemporaries at that time were like Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, Keith Jarrett, just to name a few. So we kind of had our ear to the ground to what jazz was doing, but we weren't doing it because we were playing in our own scene. But we were listening, and I'm going like, oh, trying to cop what they were doing as well. So you couldn't help but be influenced by jazz. And also we would incorporate it whenever we had the opportunity, as evidenced by, Andy and Jerry. They were extremely knowledgeable of jazz and how to adapt it to Latin. Jerry subsequently with the Fort Apache band, made incredible inroads as a band leader. But that all came from us listening to that music and that concept and making our own adaptation to our own concept, our own experience, and our own way of interpreting the music. And it wasn't always apropos because Libre, if you're playing a straight ahead typical song, you have to really play straight ahead typical. It wasn't about jazz. But then if you're playing, Little Sunflower, or if you're playing Donna Lee, then you know what I mean. You have to really learn how to, jazz comping and voicings. So that whole experience was part of my education as a young musician in New York City, man. And it's an incredible amount of gratitude that I have for that, now all these years later. And looking back, it just made me the musician that I am today. So, right. And it's a beautiful thing. I'm really, proud to have come from that tradition.
For those viewers who are watching it, just to give them some context in case they don't know, Oscar's mentioning Andy Gonzalez, who he talked about before, the great bassist, and his brother, Jerry Gonzalez, his older brother, who's no longer with us as well, the great conga player and trumpet player, also from the Bronx. And Rene Lopez, who he mentioned, still alive today, still inspiring people, all of us still, as with his incredible encyclopedic knowledge of the music historically. Now, you've played with, you're 18 years old, you're playing with Ismael Miranda, who's got the hottest record on the scene at that time. The band is, like you said, you're playing 5-6 nights a week, etc. And then from there, did you go to Grupo Folklorico, or did you go next? What was the next station in your evolution, or to Libre first?
I don't remember the exact evolution. I know that Ismael, it's kind of a long story, but we used to have the contemporaries at that time of the popular bands was Ismael Miranda, La Revelación, and Típica 73. So we would play opposite each other all the time. So imagine having that band as a reference. They were all older guys, but Ismael just lasted a year. I can't remember exactly why, but he decided to move to Puerto Rico after a year and a half, and I started playing. I was freelancing. I can't remember exactly, but I do remember. I was starting to get a name, so people would call me. It's funny because Vicky Sola, the great DJ, tells me, man, one time on a Sunday, she saw me at 4 different gigs with 4 different bands. She remarks like, man, you must be the man who doesn't sleep. But that was part of that era, because I would be playing with, with I can't remember, all the bands that I played with, but it would be, you know, the time frames would kind of work out sometimes. Where one band would play from 3 to 5, the other band would play from 7 to 9, the other band would play from 10 to 11, and the other band would play from, you know, 12 to 1 or something like that, you know. So if it was on a Sunday or Saturday. But I lost my thread with your question.
Well, after Ismael,
Oh,
you're freelancing. Then did you go to Libre then? Manny Oquendo and Libre?
you know what? I started playing with Chocolate. Chocolate,
Okay.
I recorded with Chocolate's band, who had a band. Him and Roberto Torres made a band, and they made a recording. And that was my first venture into arranging, because Chocolate, you know, let me arrange, I think 2 or 3 of the songs. So
Was it a straight up conjunto, just two
yeah,
trumpets?
it was straight up. No, it was conjunto, but it was, I don't remember if it was conjunto. It was, I think it was 2 trumpets and 2 bones,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken. So but then after that, I started playing with Pete El Conde. You know, I played with Pete for 2 or 3 years, and got to record 2 records with him. You know, one is El Negro, Este Negro Si Es Sabroso, which is, man, to this day, whenever I hear that music, I go like, wow, what a, you know, and it was really because the band was so tight, was we were working so much that we went into the studio and it was like, bam, and we killed it, and it reflects on what you hear. So, and Pete was an amazing singer. Just his voice alone, I could, you know, it wraps my whole body in warmth when I think of, you know, how he sounded as a singer, as a vocalist. But yeah, and then coinciding with all those times was my association with Andy and Jerry, and Libre came to existence. I don't remember the exact chronological order, but and then soon thereafter, Grupo Folklorico came out of that association with Libre and all the guys from Libre, and they hang at Jerry's house and Andy's house. And another beautiful experience, you know, that band, I have an indelible recognition of recording. We recorded in, I don't remember, CBS Studios in New York City, huge studio. And I remember having the headphones on and playing, and we're playing Iya. And I'm going like, oh man, and you could hear the drums like boom, thundering, like the drum sounded so amazing. I'm going like, oh my God, this sounds incredible. I hadn't heard a rhythm section like that because of the amount of drums. There were 3 conga players, you could imagine. So it was really incredible to have that. And that's what made it unique, to have that sound as part of something that was recorded, because it wasn't documented like that necessarily, you know, unless it was just a drum group. So in this case, that was what was unique about Grupo Folklorico. And then right after that was when my era with Ray Barretto started. And man, that's a whole other incredible, beautiful era that, you know, I look back and I go, you know, man, thank you, Ray Barretto, and for letting me spread my wings even more as an arranger and as a pianist. He was very, very much a musician's band leader who understood the need to let, you know, musicians spread their wings and give them the opportunity. And he did that for me. So I recorded 6 incredible records, you know, from Rhythm of Life to Reconstruction to Fuerza Gigante to Tomorrow to Tremendo Trio. All those records, they're great records. I mean, I don't listen to them, but if I do, you know, on occasion somebody play a song, I go like, wow, you know, and it, even more so if it's my arrangement. I mean, it's pretty cool that I was given that opportunity to have that experience with Ray Barretto, who, you know, who by that time had a history of always having one of the best bands, you know. All his recordings, he was much a guy who was about the music, all about the music, and wanting to, you know, put out kick-ass recordings. So really proud that I had that, you know, association with Ray, and it developed the way it did. And we had a great friendship. You know, he would rely on me sometimes because I was living alone at the time. He would come to my house and spend hours, and we'd talk about the music, and I'd show him the arrangement. He'd go, oh, well, I don't know, you know, try this or whatever. What if you try that, you know? But he would let me do what I wanted ultimately, and it was great.
Now you were talking about recording before with Pete Rodriguez and all the, you know, the recording process that we use today is a lot different than the recording process than when you were younger. So when you were recording with Pete, and you're saying that the band was so tight and you hit como un machete cortando caña, you know, like, was it because did you record entirely together, or
Yes.
and with Pete live as well, singing the vocal?
Well, no, he wouldn't be singing live because I mean, but the band would be live. He would be in the control room, and maybe he'd be singing as a reference.
I got you.
But the band was live, and it was a conjunto at that time. So
The
the musical.
the two trumpet bands, you know. So.
Well, I mean, he had three trumpets, and then he recorded with four. Live, we would do three trumpets. He recorded with four, and the musical director was Jose Febles. So Jose was so far ahead of where I was in terms of a musician that, you know, and everybody else. He was like, he just knew. This guy knows his stuff, and nobody had any qualms with him ever because, you know, they knew that he was the real deal as far as knowing the music. And that horn section for that record that I'm talking about was Victor Paz, Luis Perico Ortiz, Tony Cofresi, and Jose Febles.
Wow.
So what a horn section, huh?
Like a murderer's row of trumpets, man. Oh my God, man. Sheesh.
That was pretty cool.
Did you ever get to see? I heard from. I heard about this, and I just wanted to see if you knew about it. That he played a little bit of guitar as well. Febles did. Did you ever see him play?
Yes, without a doubt. He would do all the arrangements with guitar. He was a trumpet player. Yeah. But it's funny because one day I walk into his house, and I know him for years at this time. And by this time I had known him for years. And I walk into his house, and he's sitting at a keyboard. Like, you know, I'm going, adios. We call him Josie. Josie, y ese teclado. You know, I never had song with a keyboard. He said, bueno, yo lo uso para cuando tengo que escribir para el piano, estar seguro. In other words, he wrote it to make sure that he wanted the piano player, the piano part exactly how he wanted. So, and I didn't know this. I mean, but, you know, he was one of those few guys that could arrange without anything. He just had perfect pitch. And I've seen him, I used to see him do that. He used to tell the four trumpets, hey, you play C, F, G, B, A, fifth, you play this, you play this, you say play. He give everybody the notes. He said, okay, let's go, ready. 1, 2, 3, 4, bam. And what would come out was like, oh my God. So that's an incredible gift, you know?
Right. Now one of the things I liked about him too is that occasionally he would throw in little transitional devices, like 8 bars of samba or something like that, some Brazilian thing in the arrangements. So I guess he must have loved Brazilian music too.
He was, you know, to this day, he was very much so a great musician that I'm sure that he was influenced by everything that was, you know, you couldn't help it when you're that talented, you know, to have listened to all kind of stuff, incorporate it, you know. And if you listen to a record called, the artist was Rafael de Jesus, the singer, it's called En Grande. It was his endeavor to do it with a symphony orchestra.
Okay.
So he finally got the opportunity because he said, I'd like to do it. And I think they got a budget to be able to let him do it. And he did it. It sounds amazing. It just, you know, anybody who wants to try to find that record, it's slamming. And
what's the name of the album again? Mention it again, please.
It's Rafael de Jesus is the vocalist, the artist, and it's called En Grande. Another unique thing about that record is the first time Mark Quiñones records as a 17-year-old on Timbales.
Wow, fantastic. Well, we'll talk about Mark and Bobby Allende and all these other great percussionists that you've worked with over the years. But I want to explore a little bit about your tenure with Ray Barretto, because Ray was, I would say, he was the thinking man's conguero. He was very much a jazz musician, or thought like a jazz musician, treated his bands always like if they were jazz groups. Like you said, he was a musician's band leader. He would let the musicians stretch out, et cetera, et cetera. What was the first arrangement that you wrote for him?
Oh my God. You know what? I would have to think it's one on the Reconstruction record. Because that was the first time. It's either Albesus Campos or Un Día Seré Feliz. One of those two. And then later on came Tumbao Africano on that record as well. But yeah, it was, you know, an intimidating thing because Ray had all these great arrangers, you know, as part of, being a piano player. you had to follow these guys who were part of that tradition. And I look back and I definitely held my own, and I'm proud of the work that I did with Ray. I got to arrange a bunch of stuff after that, but you characterize him perfectly. He's a thinking man's musician. He was a jazz, treated much the band like a jazz group in a sense, because he would, let things open up and develop. And he was very much about being creative, which later on, he kind of resisted, because he was seeing that the commercial aspect of the music was being heralded and, exalted. And he kind of felt torn, which is why he finally left the salsa scene and made a jazz group, because, he didn't feel he was being appreciated. And me personally, I think that he should have just stuck to his guns. But, it goes to show you, his genius, and an example of how creative he was, that he can do that, and he did great records doing that as well. So
I remember him when I first learned about him when I was a kid. The first time I heard it was on the Hard Hands album, which is a legendary album now. And of course, Orestes Vilator, the great timbalero from Camagüey, Cuba, he was featured prominently on that record doing all these timbales solos. Louis Cruz, another great arranger and pianist, who I'm sure you looked up to, was his
without
pianist.
a doubt. Yeah. And Louis was one of the first guys who was really helpful to me.
No kidding.
I remember he was really nice. He told me, Oscar, see this phrase? If you, the clave, he would try to explain. I go like, oh, okay. He was trying to explain how it would not fit with the clave or fit with a certain clave, and it kind of made me more aware. So he was very nice. He was a sweetheart. Louis Cruz was a sweetheart. Couldn't find a nicer person, and did a lot of great arrangements for Ray and a lot of other people, doing the Fania records.
Getting back to Ray, you did that. You did that live recording at the Beacon Theater, the Tomorrow album.
Right.
Was that? There were a lot of moving parts to that record, because there were a lot of guest stars, et cetera, et cetera. Was it a nightmare, or was it a smooth concert and recording process doing that live album?
It was so long ago that I don't remember the details, but I do remember that I was thrown into the fire, because I wasn't supposed to record that record. Eddie Martinez was his piano player. He was supposed to record. And I heard now, I don't remember why, but I heard now that he got offered the gig by Gato Barbieri, right? And he left Ray in a lurch, and they called me at the last minute. So I basically went in just to go record that record live. And man, one day I guess I'll listen to it, but probably I just proud of the effort that I put forth, because to be thrown into the fire like that. Somebody reminded me, I was doing a recent interview with Colombia, South America, right? And the guy tells me, oye, el solo que tú cogiste en la hipocresía y falsedad. I'm going, I know that song. I didn't record that song. He goes, no, you took a solo. And then he reminded me that it was on that record. And then he sends it to me, and I go like, oh, wow, that's me. Because I remember it from Ray's other album before I came into the band. But I didn't realize that we did it live on that record, and I took a piano solo. So I'm like, wow, amazing.
Leave it to a Colombian record collector to remind
you. Yeah, he knew more than me about me.
That's so cool. Now, so you spent 8 years with Ray Barretto. You do a lot of fantastic writing for him, playing. I love that arrangement that you did on the Tremendo Trio record, which is Adalberto, Ray, and Celia Cruz.
Celia.
That won a Grammy for the category is Best Tropical Recording, which is basically salsa, really. But that arrangement that you did on Nadie se salve de la rumba, fantastic. You do this left-hand thing on the piano on the upbeat.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of good feedback from that arrangement for sure, and from that record.
But I would say, knowing you and your influence being Eddie Palmieri, that offbeat left-hand thing that you did, because
Probably.
Eddie did that. Eddie did that a lot, and still
Yeah.
does. So it's like a little nuanced nod hidden there in the arrangement to Eddie. So.
No doubt, and I owe him a lot. So publicly, I'll always say that. And I say it to him. I'm proud of creating my own little spot. But it comes from there. We all come from something, right? So.
Mm-hmm. So you leave Ray Barretto, then there's a great group. We have questions here that I'll get to in a little while, but somebody actually mentioned Arturo Gomez, a fellow radio announcer.
Sure, from Denver.
The program director at Cuba, great announcer, about the group Carabalí, which was a vibe-based group, and Mark Quiñones was the timbalero in that group. And I forgot the gentleman, the conga player, Primo, I think his name was.
Primo, give me 1 second because I'm staring at the vinyl. Somebody gave me this. Hold on.
Yeah. Wow.
So somebody gave me this as a gift. A
That'll
DJ here.
Soon signed by Oscar Hernandez.
Well, a DJ here in LA who's a fan. Maybe he had a couple extra copies. He says, "Hey, I'm going to give you a gift." And you know what's funny? Look at all that hair I used to have. Yeah, those two records. It's funny. Those two records, Bobby, everywhere I go in the world, everywhere, somebody always mentions them. So I think people who are fans of the music, yeah, they were really good records, and the concept. I'm really proud that I produced both of those records for that group. I wasn't the leader, but I was a producer, piano player, and arranger, along with Jose Febles, by the way, who arranged a lot of the stuff too. But it's
you took basically what the Joe Cuba sextet had done before and just ramped it up.
Without a doubt. And when I think of Joe Cuba and that sextet, and I got to play with Joe during those days, I got to play with Joe, with Tommy and Slim, and and it was, those were one of my early influences. I didn't, obviously I wasn't there when Cher was there because, I was too young, but those records that they did with Cher, man, they stand the test of time. Cher was incredible, and their concept was very, very advanced and unique for that time, and very much, I could see why people loved it and was so popular.
Oscar's mentioning Cheo. He's talking about Cheo Feliciano, the great Puerto Rican vocalist who's no longer with us. Alfania All-Star, incredible vocalist from Ponce, Puerto Rico. One of the things about the Joe Cuba sextet were the intricate cierres, stop time breaks that they would do within the structures of the arrangements. And in Carabalí, you guys took that to the next level. I mean, also as well, using intricate breaks. And you could tell that the music was highly arranged because you would use the vibes as a horn section, writing out specific lines for the vibes contrapuntally against the piano and then the vocals. Just fabulous work there. I mean, talk about that a little bit and how you approach arranging for that group.
Well, for me, I always do what my heart tells me to do. In terms of, I mean, obviously, my heart tells me to do it, and my mind will say, "Okay, yeah, that works. That's good." Or sometimes my mind will tell me, "Wow, that's slamming." So I think I'm very much into being true to myself and trying to create, and letting the creative process take its course, and using the parameters of what our music is, which is the clave, and the rhythm section, and the fact that you have really great players helps too. But I could tell that the music was very intricately arranged because Valerie Naranjo, who's the vibraphonist, she's a marimba player originally. I used to get on her case. I feel bad now. She must, I've seen her since then. She's very successful, thank God. She's done really great. But, she had a tough time because it was all on her. There wasn't a horn player. There wasn't anybody. It was all on her carrying the melodic concept of that group. So, and it wasn't easy. She used to have to shed it and shed it and shed it till she got it, So I know she worked hard on it.
Plus, she's playing four mallets where Tommy Barrios was playing with Joe Cuba. Two mallets. Yeah. And I know you wrote specifically for the four mallets because she could do that. So, I mean,
yeah exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing is she was an incredible marimba player, but I don't think vibes, she wasn't really a vibe player.
Right, right.
So her background was slightly different. The sensibility is slightly different, but it is different. So she had to really kind of train herself, and she wound up doing a great job. Those records, stand the test of time. And the other thing I remember about those records, since Arturo's asking, is that the singer was a young, green Dominican kid, Aris Martinez, who, man, I felt bad because at the studio I said, no, do it again. No, do it again. Now you're out of tune, do it again. That's it. Now let's do it in tune, but to his credit,
no Pro Tools back then, yeah.
well, exactly. There was no auto tune, no Pro Tools, no nothing. So, and everything was recorded to, 2-inch tape, which, is amazing when you think about that. And that's probably what gives it its sound too, that the analog sound that you hear on those records.
Definitely get these albums if you can get them. I'm sure they're available on CD now. Carabali, and for those of you who want to know what Carabali means the Calabar region in southern Nigeria. The people from that area that were brought to Cuba during the colonial period. From that region, the Calabar, the Spanish called them Carabali, so that it's referring to our African roots in that particular region. And most of the Carabali speak Efik, which is where we get words like bongo and chévere, etc., in the Abacuá tradition, which is a fraternal order of men in Cuba from that region. So, but from Carabali now, you then all of a sudden start work. Well, we worked together with Luis Perico Ortiz. We did that great album, Breaking the Rules, which was the first recording on 48 tracks digitally. Luis Perico Ortiz, great, incredible trumpet player from Puerto Rico, composer, arranger of, as Mr. Hernandez has said, a genius in his own right. And you started working with the great Ruben Blades in this seminal group called Seis del Solar, which again takes the concept of the Joe Cuba sextet and what you did with Carabali and puts it on steroids, because now you start occasionally using 2 keyboards in the group. You add the drum set as well to the conga, bongo, and timbales. Tell us about your association with Ruben Blades and how that group Seis del Solar came into being.
Well, Ruben was the top singer at that time, bar none. He would just come off the big success of Siembra with Pedro Navaja and Pablo Pueblo and Plástico and all those great songs. And it was time, according to him, to leave Willie and go on his own and follow his own path. And I remember, seeing him at the village gate. He says, "Oh yeah, I got the and we pulled me to the side. He says, "Hey, I'm going to do this. I'm leaving Willie." And he says, "I don't want to use trombones because I don't want to step on Willie's stuff. And I always loved Joe Cubano and Cheo Feliciano, so I think I'm going to go with that." And I said, "Okay." He was calling the shots, and it was his concept originally. But during those times, keyboards became very much in vogue. As to the sound of the world, and we started experimenting, and then some of the songs that he was introducing we felt needed drums, to really convey the musical concept. So we added Rabi Amin on drums, and then we added later on Arturo Ortiz on keyboard. So we developed the sound, and again, just proud of my association with Ruben and what an incredible impact that music had on the world. I mean, there are people who grew up with that music, and it was a beautiful experience and a beautiful time for me to create yet in another different way, and to try to, and everything came from Ruben, I gotta say, he's pretty genius, and he would be giving us the material, myself, Mike Viñas, Richie Marrero, and we would take it and mold it how we felt it should be molded. But the inspiration came from him. It's very easy when you have somebody who's giving you great songs. So and he had a really good harmonic sense because he played guitar, Ruben does, and he plays it really well as a composer. So the songs would be fleshed out harmonically already when you got them. You didn't have to figure anything out, which was great, because I mean, for me, that was just made it easy, you know. So great association. It lasted until 1996, 13 years, because we started in '83. But it's another epoca, as they say, in my musical career that's documented by all the records that we got to do, and very proud of that as well.
Fantastic. One thing I wanted to ask you about is the two keyboard concept, which eventually in Cuba they started using in timba bands, in the modern salsa bands over there. Was that was Ruben's idea to use the two keyboards, or was it your idea? Or
You know what? I don't remember exactly whose idea, but don't forget that was the times of Return to Forever, right? So that music, you know, all musicians were listening to that. They, you know, Chick Corea was on the forefront with that band, and Mahavishnu and John McLaughlin, and there was a lot of other people who were, you know, making headway with a lot of new music with that sound. So we couldn't help but say, hey, we need to get on board with this. And it was a great, there was a famous keyboard that came out that everybody had to have one, which was the Yamaha DX7. So we got one and we started messing around with it. And once we found out that we wanted to go that route, you know, we found Arturo Ortiz, who, as a Latino, nobody had the knowledge and experience of keyboards like he did. You know, he was really into it. Era, as we say, era un fiebrú. You know, he was totally, you know, into that sound and how to make it happen. So it was natural once he came into the band to really, you know, take it to the max with that. So that's the way that happened.
and that influenced Luis Perico Ortiz for that Breaking the Rules album, because he wanted to get that same sound, except he had the horn section with the trombones and trumpets as well. So
Exactly, because I remember Perico telling me that specifically. He said, "Mira, yo quiero." There was a song that I arranged called "Cuentas del Alma." He said, "Yo quiero algo así." So very much, you know, Ruben's music was influencing people for sure.
now you come after working with Ruben for several years, Grammy Awards for those recordings, working with Luis Perico Ortiz. Then all of a sudden, the project comes that in many ways, I would say, changes your life and opens up a door to a whole multiverse of possibilities, which is working with Paul Simon on the Capeman. And I must say, I remember, I think I told you the story. I was coming out of the Steinhardt building at NYU, where I now teach, and I see you and Paul Simon coming up the block, and I say hello and everything, and just cordially, etc., etc. So, and then we left, and in my head, I'm going, man, whatever these two guys are working on, it's going to be something monstrous, and you start working on the Capeman. So, tell us about that experience working with Paul Simon, and how did he become aware of you?
It's kind of an interesting story. When you think about it, it's kind of, you know, things happen in my life that you just have to look up and go, well, thank you. I mean, I had produced a record for, you know, Eddie Torres, the dancer.
Of course, yeah, the Mambo dancer.
Eddie, the Mambo Kings. So Eddie had a band because, you know, he used to work with Tito Puente, but Tito Puente wasn't always available for him to work with. So he wanted to make a band. You know, and Mitch Froman was a musical director, but he came to me about producing a record, musically producing this record, and we got into the studio, we chose the songs, did the arrangements, recorded it, and it's called Dance City, of which I wrote the title track. I composed the title track, but you know, it was on an independent label, Hernandezs fronted the money and they put it out independently. So it never really did anything, but it did get a great review in the New York Times. And Paul Simon read the review and he said, hey, go get me this record. And he listened to the record. He says, wow, this sounds amazing. Who's this guy? And they said, oh, that's Oscar Hernandez. He's worked with Ruben Blades. And so he calls me out of the blue. He says, I'm working on a project. And I said, what am I going to say? I mean, honestly, I wasn't a Paul Simon fan. You know, I knew who he was, but his music wasn't part of, my history and my, upbringing as a young musician. Obviously, I learned after the fact, and I know what a great musician and great, composer he is. But I tell people that I earned my doctorate's degree in musical theater on that show, because I really did. Figuratively, I earned my doctorate's degree because there was so many things involved. I can't even begin to tell you. I could probably write a book if I could remember half of it. But the truth of the matter is, it was an amazing experience, ultimately working with like 47 people in the cast. Imagine that, 23 musicians in the pit. So I got to really see close up what musical theater is about, working with the different directors that we had. And unfortunately, the show wasn't a success. There were a lot of things that were not right about it, but there were a lot of things that were incredibly beautiful about it. I mean, it was just an amazing experience. And the music, to this day, I can feel really proud. The music was beautiful, So I'm really proud of that.
Those of us who were around during that time period, myself included, were reading about the pitfalls you were going through. Almost. First, it started on a weekly basis, then on a daily basis, et cetera, et cetera. If you may, tell us a little bit about some of those pitfalls, because, one of the positive things about the show was that everybody that I know that went to see it said that the set was spectacular. The set.
It was the set design alone was worth the price of admission. I'll tell you right now, and the music was worth the price of admission. But there were problems, and there was a lot of controversy about the story, because it was about a murderer, basically, and people didn't want to hear it. You're basically.
Tell us a little bit about the story, if you could synopsize it, so for the people that are watching.
Well, I mean, the story was about Salvador Agron, a young 16-year-old who was born in Puerto Rico but emigrated to New York and had just turned 16. He was part of a gang called the Vampires. And it was very much about the turf wars in New York. The Irish couldn't cross here, Puerto Ricans couldn't cross here, the blacks couldn't cross here. And there were very much turf wars between the different ethnic groups, the Italians, the Guineas, who they talked, the Spics, we were the Spics, so he stabbed two young kids in a park on 45th Street and killed them as part of, that turf war. And he spent
the west side or the east side?
45th and between 8th and 9th.
Okay, the west side.
So, but it very much captured New York City because he wore a cape as part of the gang was called the Vampires. And, his friend carried an umbrella. They called him the Umbrella Man. So anyway, Paul was kind of influenced by the daily headlines in the papers for a month of the Cape Man, the Cape Man, the Cape Man. And he thought, maybe this would be a good story. But obviously, he was telling the story of somebody who murdered two kids and people didn't want to hear about it. The fact that he was a young, just turned 16, and I would never try to justify, a murderer, but there were extenuating circumstances, that you can't ignore, you have to look at. And part of the story was redemption. He served his time, he got out as a youth, he served his time, he got out as a grown man, rehabilitated supposedly, because he was rehabilitated. And that was the story that Paul was trying to tell. Simple as that. But, the critics didn't want to hear it. The controversy was way too much. And he made other key technical mistakes that I'm sure looking back, he would have done differently. But the story was beautiful. The music was beautiful, that notwithstanding. But for me, again, it was an amazing experience to be involved in. Little did I know, he said, I'll forever be grateful, because he said, hey, you want to be musical director? At that point I had done, all that work. And I said, yeah, okay, that's, he sends me into a pit. I go see the Phantom. I said, I've never been in a pit. I never, he sends me to go see the pit of Phantom of the Opera. And I saw all these musicians who are bored out of their wits, go like, what are you doing here? You don't need to be here. Because these guys who were playing, 8 shows a week for I don't know how many years, it's like after a while you want to blow your brains out. But nevertheless, I got to taste and see and find out what that was about and prove myself also because, the band was amazing. And to his credit, he said, get your people. Get your people. So I got my people, which was, amazing to have a pit full of Latinos like I had, it was an incredible, it was a heartfelt, heartbreaking experience on many levels. I was getting paid a lot of money. So money that I had never seen before. So thank God for that. And there were a lot of blessings, that I look back, working with all the amazing people that I got to work with, even, Paul, which was amazing for me. So
Now, one of the things that you had to deal with was the constant changing of directors. I don't know how many directors you had, but
well, there was
why was that? And because when the director would change, did you have to all of a sudden, oh man, I got to change the music again, or was that a pitfall?
No, the director's more about telling the story. Although the last incarnation of the director was Jerry Zaks. When at this point they had to find somebody who has a proven record to try and fix what was wrong with the show, according to the experts, they brought him on board. And he wanted to make everything faster. He wanted to cut the music. And you could only cut before you sacrifice the integrity of the music. And Paul, I was in the middle of, he's on one end, Paul's on the other end saying, you can't do that shit later for him. No, I'm not doing it. But they reached a happy medium. And in some ways he did improve the show. But I really got to see, firsthand what it is they're looking for, what they're trying to do. And it's all about telling the story. Because ultimately, you can have good music, but you have to have a story where people walk away, they feel the story. They know what it's about, and they can feel an identification with the story. So and he hired Mark Morris, who's a great choreographer, but he wasn't a director. So that was his first mistake, a lot of mistakes, he was only trying to do the best, as all of us who make mistakes, sometimes it comes from, trying to do the best that you can, and it's not making the right decision sometimes, but it happens to everybody,
Right. Now, were you disappointed? We have a question here from Angel Roman, who was, we talked about, you already answered the question about how was it to work on Broadway, etc. Were you disappointed that Paul Simon sang on the CD and not Ruben Blades and Mark Anthony?
Well, no, because that was people have to understand that was a different version. That was Paul's version of his music. All right. So we did do the cast album, which to this day, I don't even know if it got released. I heard that it is online. You can't buy it in the stores, but it is online somehow. You can download it. But no, because the purpose of that was very different. That was just Paul's. He ultimately, if the show was a success, we were going to have a cast album and the whole deal, and you would have heard the original people singing, So, I mean, Mark Anthony, Anita Rosario, Ruben Blades, all the people who were integral parts of Luba Mason, of the story, were going to be featured, but it never got that far, Bobby.
Now, you did tell me about, in conversations that we've had, that there was a very successful run at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, where the music was performed live, simply in a concert format. Tell us about that. You've mentioned to me privately that was a total success. Talk about
that. Well, that was total redemption, because I mean, when the main critic on Broadway, Ben Bradley, wrote the review the next day, of the opening, you could tell he had an agenda to really smash the show. And he subsequently wrote a great review for the BAM version, because they never trashed the music. They all felt the music was brilliant. But the BAM version, when Paul called me, I was like, I mean, I could never tell him no, because I have a debt of gratitude to him. But I really didn't want to do it. I was like, oh man, I don't want to relive this no more. I had enough of it, but I had no choice. So I got involved again. And to my surprise, it turned out to be an incredible version of that show. We did it for 7 straight days at BAM, and the reviews were amazing. The reaction was amazing. And the feeling of the music alone was amazing. There was a few different people involved, obviously, but the music was the music. And it was really incredibly gratifying to finally feel redemption, even from Paul. I could tell, and I saw the smile on his face, because, you know, he was always, you know, very much stressed and beleaguered with the whole situation, and I felt bad for him. You know, I really did. You can't, you know, you can't win for trying sometimes, man.
Right. Now, is there an album of that performance at the BAM? The BAM.
I believe there is, because I saw a video of it and I said, wow, it looks amazing. I don't know, you know, like I moved on. I moved, like everything as I move on in my life, but I'm sure it's out there and it's pretty amazing, you know. So people want to look for it, you know, I'm sure they can find it.
Now, we go from the Capeman and that, which has trials and tribulations, but it also has its triumphs as well, personally satisfying for you on a musical level. Now, bring us to the formation of the Spanish Harlem Orchestra. Tell us the, you know, how that started and how, you know, the formation of the group and the subsequent Grammy Awards you've won with that group.
Well, I mean, for me, I said, you know, divine order. It was things that come into my path. I don't know why they happened, but I know that they were meant for me. So Spanish Harlem Orchestra wasn't even my idea. It was the idea of a gentleman, a friend of mine named Aaron Levinson, who's from Philadelphia, who's a DJ, and he's a fan of the music. And he's produced some records as a DJ, you know what I mean? So he called me, he had gotten a deal with Warner Brothers Records to produce a certain concept record. He was a fan of Latin music. So he calls me and I said, yeah, okay, great, let's do it. I mean, I didn't know what was gonna happen with it. You know, he picked some of the songs, I picked some of the songs. I wasn't happy with some of the songs he picked, I gotta say. We went back and forth, but it was his baby. So at that point, and so we go into the studio, we record the record, and Warner Brothers drops it. And it was in the can for 1.5 years without doing nothing. He sells it to a small record label of a friend of his named Andy Hurwitz, Rope-A-Dope Records, releases the record, and it gets nominated for a Grammy. So I started the band, you know, and he's not a musician. So, and then we went to doing the second record, which featured, you know, Ruben Blades as a guest, and it wins the first Grammy. And I was on my way. The band started getting recognition. We started traveling, started getting recognition all over the world as being the torchbearers of what this music is. Because don't forget, during those times, people forgot what hardcore salsa was. Because they're listening to all these pop salsa records with all the singers, not featuring any bands of consequence, all studio recordings done with click tracks. And we come out with something like was, you know, like was the music that I did with Ray Barretto back in the late 70s. So I think it touched a chord. And then on top of that, the band sounded great live. So we were delivering and we started garnering recognition now to the point where we have 7 records and we've won 3 Grammys, and I'm really proud of the mark that we've made. I'm really proud of what we've created. And the fact, for me, the fact that I can maintain the legacy of this music alive and well, and honor with respect, you know, the musicians that we grew up with that are no longer here, you know, by keeping the music alive in that way. So I'm truly blessed. And also to be able to have my own concept and put my own stamp on the music, you know, now with all these years of experience, right? I think I'm pretty good at what I do without no ego, just in terms of like, and I'm pretty passionate. I mean, I have nothing else. Music has given me an amazing, amazing life. I've never got to travel, you know, all over the world like I have, you know, from where I'm from, if it wasn't for music. I always tell people one of the indelible moments I'll never forget is being on a sleeper bus with Ray Barretto, arriving into Paris, my first time at 6 o'clock in the morning on the bus, traveling the whole city and just looking at the city going like, wow. And the first thing that occurred to me was like, man, there's a whole lot more to the world than where I'm from. And it made me realize that there's a whole world vision, you know, to everything out there, and certainly the music. But
And
Yeah, so Spanish Harlem Orchestra has been an incredible feather in my cap. I think it's something that we as all Latinos should be proud. I'm all about representing the best of what my culture is through what I do. And I hope that people see it that way and interpret that way, because I'm representing you and every other Latino out there. We've been to Hong Kong, to Russia, to Japan, to Australia, to every country, just about every major city in Europe. So what does that tell you? We're representing the best and garnering great reaction along the way. So I'm really proud of what we created, and it's a tribute to now all those years, of what we just spoke about for the last hour and a half.
really quick, the name Spanish Harlem Orchestra, was that your idea? Was that
No, it was his idea. So think about it. When I think about it, right? It was his idea, and I think it was his baby at the time, but he's not a musician.
you still have a stake financially?
No, he gave it up because he realized it's not for him. He's not a musician, you know what I mean? He's not, he helped create that first one, but then I created everything after, you know what I mean? It's going to be, I produced every single record, and the concept of every record has been me. So, I was going to tell you something, I forgot.
That said, congratulations on the latest recording called Spanish Harlem Orchestra, the Latin Jazz Project, which features such notable jazz musicians as Joe Locke on vibes, Tom Harrell on the trumpet, an old student of mine, Mike Rodriguez on the trumpet as well, Kurt Elling on vocals. Every track has a featured performer on it, and there's one track that features the entire band, so congratulations on that.
Thank you, bro.
We're kind of disappointed that you didn't get nominated for the Grammy on this go round. I'm kind of surprised about that. We talked about that before. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, I was really super disappointed, because the truth of the matter is I really feel in my heart it deserves to be nominated. There's no doubt. It's a great record. And more so for all the people that it features. Could you imagine all these people are featured on one record? You mentioned, a few of them. There's a few more that you didn't mention. But the truth is, and the music that they created, the magic that they created, there's no doubt in my mind. But I can't complain. I'm not going to sound like sour grapes here. And I don't want to disrespect the people who were nominated. You know what I mean? But if you ask me, obviously I'm biased. There is zero doubt that that record should have been nominated. At the expense of who, I don't know, but there's no doubt it deserves a nomination. But you know what, Bobby? We've won 3 Grammys, and I can't be the one to complain. So that's life, and that's fine. We'll come out kicking major, on the next one, which was what we plan to do, and what we always plan to do.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. We've been so gracious with your time. We have just a quick few questions. Some of the questions that were asked that have been fed to me have already been answered by you. But here's a question from Richie Beltran. Do you remember Mr. Santo, the director of the Gramercy Boys Club?
Mr. who?
Mr. Santo, the director at the Gramercy Boys Club.
How do you spell that?
According to this, it's S-A-N-T-O.
No, I remember Hampton. Hank Morton was the music director. Buddy White was the trumpet teacher. I can't remember. No, I don't remember that name for some reason.
Okay.
Talking about now, probably 1960, 65, 66.
Wow.
So it's a long time.
It's amazing you remember those names, right?
Well, I mean, Ham Morton, I remember, because I remember he gave me a certificate. It's just play you the band. He says, his comment was, barring any unforeseen setbacks, he should go all the way. Talking about me, so it was my first certificate of anything, and I guess he was right, because I've come a long way, right?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, yes, indeed. We have a question here from Rivera Ramsey. What about Jorge Millet? No one talks about him. Jorge Millet, the great arranger, composer.
Yeah, Jorge Millet was really a great arranger, no doubt about it, and very much respected from all the musicians. But he made more of a name in Puerto Rico, although he came to New York very briefly towards the end, and I got to play with him and got to do some. I don't remember exactly what I did with Jorge Millet, but record some of his arrangements in the studio. And brilliant musician, and like many other people who are unheralded. You know, you could say the same thing for Gil Lopez for me. You know, Gil Lopez was an incredible arranger. And if you want proof, go listen to the first 6 Spanish Harlem Orchestra records. He has songs on those records. So like him, Jorge Millet deserves more recognition.
Fantastic. Now here's a question. We don't know who it's from, but regarding Manny Oquendo Libre, was there a political or social ideology behind the name and formation of the band?
I would say that, you know, those were very revolutionary times. So, you know, and Andy and Jerry were kind of at the forefront of very revolutionary ideas, you know, as we were young Latinos discovering our identity in New York, we were counter the establishment sometimes. So I think that's a reflection or reaction to that. They wanted to be free, and don't know exactly, because I don't, you know, I'm speculating here. I never asked Andy, you know, why he named Libre, but if I had to speculate, it would be that.
Here we have a question from Hector Mori. Who and where are the groups, individuals that come closest to continuing in this tradition that you are part of?
Wow. Who are the groups that are continuing the tradition? Well, certainly the musicians who are my contemporaries. You know, you mentioned like Mark and Bobby, you know, a group like Ocho y Más. You have somebody new like Gonzalo Grau, who understands the tradition with his group. He's from Venezuela, but he's from Berkeley. I think Jeremy Bosch, who's my singer, who's doing what he's doing, very much at the forefront of keeping it. Doug Beavers as well, who just came out with a new record that sounds, you know, awesome. So there are people, and you know what, I hate to mention people because I know I'm forgetting a lot of people I can't think of right now. My brain is getting tired. But there are people out there, you know, that young musicians that I go, wow, that's the future of the music. God bless them, you know. And I you know, and they have my support. I tell them all the time, you know, whatever I could do to help, you know, I'm here. Let me know. And yeah, I just see, like, I did a project for my trumpet player, Manuel Maneco Ruiz. I did something for Luchito Munoz, who's from Peru. So there are a few people out there that are making names, and I hate to, obviously, on a different level, people like Pedrito Martinez, so many other people I can't think of right now at the moment. But you know, there's good music. They need to be given the opportunity, just like we need to be constantly be given the opportunity and supported. You know, I'll tell the people who listen, if you don't support it, we're not going to be here. You know, we need the support. We can't function without you. You know, I mean, as much as I don't have a rich uncle. I don't have, you know, right now I'm surviving on unemployment, to be honest with you. So, and thank God for that. But I have my heart and my passion for this music that'll never die, you know, and it's going to be on the level like you hear it coming from me, because I have a commitment to what that is, you know, and it comes from a real place. There's a frame of reference to what I do. And that's important, man. It really is. So thank God there are people. I got a grant from Chamber of Music America. By the way, I'm doing my own live virtual stream video from Catalina's Jazz Club next Saturday on December 12th. So tune in. You'll see some of the great musicians that play this music. Justo Mario, Jimmy Brownlee. It's going to be a great night, you know, at a club with nobody present, but I got a grant to be able to pay for it. So that's awesome. You know, looking forward to that.
Fantastic. And we have a question here from Lalo Davila. Your choice of percussionists is outstanding. How do you decide who you use for each session?
Bobby,
Well, I
that's
mean-
really for you. That's really for you, I think. I think it was for you.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry.
Well, we'll have Oscar one day go through this discussion. But I'm going to put that on Oscar right now. You've always had fantastic players in the percussion section, which is the heartbeat of the music in the Spanish Harlem Orchestra. I think the first team bandleader you had was Chino Nunez, fantastic player. He was also a great arranger too. And now you have Luisito Quintero.
Well, we're hearing a lot of echo, Bobby.
Oh, there's another microphone on or something.
Okay. But I mean, look, the truth of the matter is I've been blessed, my whole life to play with great percussionists. When I mentioned when I was 18 playing with Nicky Barretto and Frankie Rodriguez, imagine then to go from there to play with, Manny Oquendo and Jerry Gonzalez, and to go from there to play, just to mention a few, because there's so many other people that I've gotten to play with, Ralph Irizarry and Eddie Montalvo. Ralph was a long part of my career because he played with Ray and then played with Ruben. So, and actually Ralph, when Chino left the band and I needed a team bandleader, Ralph is the one who told me, hey man, I said, who do you think I should use? He said, Luisito Quintero. I said, wow, yeah, I know he's great. You think he'll do it? I called Luisito. He said, yeah, absolutely. At that time, we had a lot of work. We had a tour coming up. We were just going to do I think a week at the Blue Note. So, and Luisito's he's just one of the top guys. And before that was Bobby Allende, Roberto Quintero. I played with Mark Quiñones. So I've been blessed. How do you choose? They're all good. There's nobody, I can't say there's somebody better than the other because they're all like top of the heap. You can't get better. You could use any one of them and close your eyes, and they all have their own different tastes, When people ask me, well, who's the best? Well, there is no best. That's your own personal criteria. Piano players, there's so many great, incredible piano players for different reasons. You can't pick one. So percussionists are, and it's a beautiful thing to play with good percussionists, man, because from my seat, I'm on cruise control. I called it off and I'm cruise control. And this is after we rehearse, because I'm very particular about rehearsing stuff and getting it right. So, we can play to have fun. We're not thinking about, do I know the music? No, we know the music. Now let's have fun. So, and that's part of my philosophy. But Lalo, my boy from Nashville, thank you, man. I haven't seen, he's a great percussionist as well and singer out there in Nashville.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned the group that's going to play at the Catalina Bar and Grill. This is a project that probably a lot of the viewers here that are your fans don't know about. Your small Latin jazz group. Yeah, that fantastic album. I think you have 2 albums out with that small group. So tell us a little bit about the formation of this small Latin jazz group that you have and those recordings that you've put out.
Well, it's an opportunity for me to basically implement my talents in a different way. Mainly as a composer, because all the songs are my own compositions. So they're my own compositions with my own identifiable sound as far as Latin jazz. And I'm here in LA. I mean, I'm in New York a lot, but I'm living in LA these days. Might be going back to New York soon, but right now I'm here in LA, and the great players that are here, there's some great players here too. So for me to be able to integrate them into this sound and make the 2 records that I've done, one is called The Art of Latin Jazz, and the second one is called Love the Moment. I happen to have it here because I was just gonna mail it to somebody. But they're all my compositions, and this one was deemed as one of the best releases of the year 2019 by Downbeat Magazine. So really proud of that music as well. And it gives me an opportunity to basically stretch out my piano talents and my composition talents in a different way, which is cool, and that's this is part of Chamber Music America that I got a grant, thank God, talking about supporting, I had never applied for a grant ever. And at the how would you say, the suggestion of a good friend of mine, actually Andrea Breckfeld was suggesting that I apply. And when I contacted the lady, she says, you're exactly the person we're looking for. You're exactly the type of musician we're looking for. Somebody who's, done so much. So they were very helpful, I got to say, and thank God for that. You know?
Fantastic. And talking about your compositions and arrangements, many of them are available from 3-2 Clave Music Publishing.
Correct.
So talk a little bit about the relationship with that publishing firm, 3-2 Clave Music. Steve
Well,
Alcala's great publishing company.
Yeah, 3-2. I know Steve for 30 years when he started with nothing. Basically, just passion. All he had was passion for the music. And I said, yeah, I'm there. What do you need? How can I help? You know, and he's now built it where he has an incredible catalog, and I'm proud to have been a part of that for close to 30 years now. And he sells a lot of music to, you know, junior high schools, and universities all over the world. So it's a good association to have. Yeah, we don't make a lot of money, to be honest with you, but it's something. And your music is getting out there and it's being played and people are recognizing, hey, somebody sent me, there's a song that I composed called "On Song for My Father." You should see the different versions that somebody sent me. It's amazing. They had these groups from they had a group from Singapore who was doing a choreography to it, which is amazing. I'm like, wow. So through the internet, you get people who will turn on to your music, and it's a beautiful thing, you know. So
fantastic. It's called 3-2 Clave Music Publishing.
3-2.
Excuse me?
3-2, I think.
Sorry,
I think it's 3-2.
Yeah, you're right. You got to put that dash in there or else it won't pop up. but
it sound like 32.
Yeah. Yeah. But in case any of you who are educators or would-be band leaders or established band leaders want to check out some of Maestro Hernandez's music and want to play it, there are, in a variety of settings, there are small combo arrangements, like for 4 or 5 horns. There are big band arrangements, and there are even smaller group arrangements that are available of Oscar's writing from that publishing company, as well as many other great writers, etc., in the world of Latin jazz. You find some of my stuff there too, as well, from my own big multiverse big band. So Oscar, you've been so gracious with your time. Just to close off, do you have any advice that you'd like to impart on the fans as well as the young musicians that are out there watching right now?
Yeah, I would say wear your mask. No, people ask me for, you know, young musicians, and I would say that you need to have perseverance, because you're going to get knocked down. You're going to have a zillion insecurities about who you are, what you do, how you do it, and keep growing, keep learning, keep getting yourself into situations, keep networking it, and keep following the path. You know, don't get sidetracked. Don't give up, because if you give up, then you will never know. But, you know, really exhaust the possibilities with your perseverance to keep working on your craft and keep learning it, and associate yourself with good people. That's the best I can tell you right now, you know, and there's a whole lot of music, you know. We're blessed with the internet now to have all this stuff that you can learn from on YouTube. It's just amazing. And Google, it's incredible. So there's not lack of information out there. We didn't have it when we grew up. You know, I had a different way to learn, which was great as well. But the amount that's out there is just mind-boggling, Bobby. So that's all I have to say, man. And I wish everybody, you know, during these times, this is a tough time for sure. Wish everybody a lot of health and, you know, blessings, and you know, stay positive and have faith in everything that you're dealing with, everything that you want to do, because, you know, you'll constantly get knocked down, and you'll be dealing with situations that are frustrating. I have my own frustrations, but, you know, I work through them, and I vow to stay positive, and I keep, you know, vow to stay creative, you know. That's what I feel. So thank you, bro. You know, for me, first of all, look, it's a pleasure with you, because we go back all these years. You're so incredibly knowledgeable. I mean, people don't know from this discussion how knowledgeable Bobby is, but he's one of the most knowledgeable people that we have. Blessed to have him as part of our community. And not only that, he's somebody who gets it, who gets the struggle, who gets the fight about what we're all about. Because no matter what we do, yes, it's good and dandy, but it's all about, you know, pushing the envelope, letting people know. And I mentioned this to you. Look, I don't want to take a back seat anymore. I'm tired of it. When people, we go to jazz festivals and they want to try to put us in the, the Latino pigeonhole. I'm sorry, and then we go out there and we steal the show. So the truth of the matter is I don't want to take a back seat to anymore. I've been doing this for 50 years. I'm really good at what I do. And I love it with incredible passion. And when you have people who understand that, man, that's what it's about. And to share it with you and your listeners, that's what it's about for me. God bless you, bro. I love you. Elena, thank you. Gracias a los dos, con la esperanza de poder abrazarlo en persona muy pronto.
Thank you so much, Oscar.
We got a date at Patricia's in the Bronx.
Thank you so much, Oscar. That was incredible. It was really incredible. We want to thank all the people who joined us tonight. We have more programs coming up in the next couple of weeks at the Bronx Music Heritage Center on our Facebook page here, so please check back in. But also, I just wanted to make one final announcement that, Oscar and Bobby were talking a lot about sort of the Nuevayorkino experience in music during the 70s, 60s, and 70s and 80s. And just one thing to remember that was part of that scene was, of course, the Nuevayorkino poetry scene. And yesterday we lost the founder of the Nuevayorkino Poets Cafe and one of the founders of the Nuevayorkino poetry scene, Miguel Agarin. So just in honor of him, we want to remember him and think about him, as you're listening to the great music of salsa and all the great Nuevayorkins who made this incredible music. Also maybe read some of his poetry and from the Nuevayorkino poetry as well. So everyone, be safe, and hopefully we'll see you real soon. Thank you.
And
God bless.
All right, Oscar. And remember what Maestro Hernandez said: support the music. Support the music. We now more than ever. And one way you can support it is by continuing to support us here at the Bronx Music Heritage Center. Go to our Facebook page. Go to our website. We have more great percussion discussions coming up. All the percussion discussions from the past have been archived. You can go to the Bronx Music Heritage Center Facebook page to view all of them that we've done. And if you want to listen to the music from the comfort of your home, don't forget, on Friday nights from 9 to 11 Eastern Standard Time, on the #1 jazz station in the nation, yours truly, Bobby Sanabria, hosts the Latin Jazz Cruise from 9 to 11 Eastern Standard Time on WBGO FM, the #1 jazz station in the nation. Wherever you are, it's 88.3 in the tri-state area, but if you want to listen on your computer, WBGO.org, WBGO.org. And if you missed the show this Friday, don't worry, because you can listen to it in the archives by simply going to WBGO Latin Jazz Cruise the next day, as the show is archived and the previous show in the next 2 weeks. For the Bronx Music Heritage Center for Percussion Discussion, and Elena Martinez, my great co-artistic director, and in Command Central Master Control, Jorge Vasquez. My name is Bobby Sanabria. Mucho H, much positive energy. Be safe, be healthy, wear your mask, and wash your hands. Nos vemos.